All right, everyone. Donald Trump has decided to visit Poland before visiting with any of these Western European states, other than I think there was a plan for visiting the UK and it got delayed, and now he's going to visit them anyway, but he's visiting Poland first, before Germany, before France, before anybody else. I strongly support this, and here's why. Poland and these other Eastern European nations are more reliant upon the United States. I don't think that the people there fully trust the Western Europeans, who historically have taken a back seat in trying to protect some of these free nations in Eastern Europe. I think they would rather ally with the much larger military and economic power of the United States. The friendship is growing between the United States and most of these nations. We're talking about Poland, Hungary, Romania, certainly the Baltic states, and others within the region, while it's waning with regards to Germany, France. Not really the UK, it's more or less stable there. But you've got a troubled Europe right now. Even Macron himself, who is a globalist and a strong ally of Germany, bringing France closer into the German sphere, trying to create sort of a bilateral control mechanism for Western Europe. Even he's having second thoughts about some aspects of the EU. He's like, we need Europe now more than ever. Europe must remain strong, but there are so many problems with the European Union. It's difficult, so we need to think about reform. That's actually going to be a problem, I think, because Merkel doesn't want reform. Merkel wants more bureaucracy, more strangulation of her neighbors so she can keep up the industry, so she can stay in power like the Führer that she wants to be. The French may be averse to that. That may become a problem down the road. Meanwhile, the UK is leaving. They have a Brexit. They may very well drag parts of Scandinavia off with them. They may end up with like Norway, Iceland, Denmark, possibly Sweden, maybe the Netherlands or one of these countries sort of conglomerating together into an economic bloc. And then the UK would use that as leverage to work with its own Commonwealth states, to work with, India has been mentioned, certainly English-speaking African nations, parts of Latin America, basically restoring something closely approximating at least the economic virtues of the latter-day British Empire. Meanwhile, you've got Poland and Hungary sort of leading the charge against EU tyranny, refusing to take in migrants, trying to buff up their own military capabilities. I think at this point they've lost faith in the ability of the EU to generate its own military force, and they realize that sort of failed, so they need NATO now more than ever. I think if push came to shove, and relations between the US and sort of the German and French sphere now became bad enough, most of Europe would join us. You'd end up with Central Europe and a few of these other states clinging to the dying EU as it slowly smolders, and then the rest of Europe wising up and realizing this is not going to work, and Merkel gets a miniaturized empire of sorts. I think that's what would happen. Poland is a very strong ally of the United States. It's there with Japan and the Philippines and some of these other nations where there are extremely positive feelings between the people here generally and people within these other states. And it's not just the government happens to be friendly with the US, it's the people, the culture happen to be friendly with the people and culture here and vice versa. I feel very positive towards the Polish. I think they're one of the best allies we have in Europe. They're a better ally than Germany's being. Germany wants to create like a European empire. That's what Merkel wants. She wants control. She wants conquest. It's the same old German scheme that we had before. Oh yeah, we're gonna conglomerate all this. It's just taken a different form, more of a Napoleonic form of sorts. It's like this age-old Napoleon-esque goal that was spawned many, many, many years ago that they keep running with, and they always fail and fuck Europe every single time. Who would want to be part of such a venture? This scheme of Merkel's, which she's really the source of this along with some of the people in Brussels, won't work. It's not going to work. The UK is already left. There goes one of the biggest economies. Poland and Hungary and Slovakia and the Czech Republic are all basically standing in the way of her policies. So are the Romanians and the Greeks and so forth. You've got people all over the board economically. You've got nations that are embracing almost a total laissez-faire model, that have very right-wing, very hyper-patriotic cultures, maybe something like Poland. And then you've got these far-left states like Greece that you have massive protests if they say they want to cut pensions by 1%. and they're all sort of aligned in their mutual disagreement with the policies of Angela Merkel. That's because Merkel just wants a German industry on the backs of everybody else in Europe. And for the major partners like France, she'll give them a pass and say, okay, well, we're going to leave you alone bureaucratically. All these other nations, they get fucked in the ass. So it wouldn't make any sense for them to want to be part of Merkel's empire. I wish Trump would deliver a statement tomorrow saying, the Germans obviously feel they don't need the United States, so we're not going to protect them. Let them fend for themselves, and then see what Merkel's approval looks like the next day. The Germans might very well say, okay, we don't need you either. Okay, well, how are you going to defend yourself? A lot of these military systems, you build a lot of military goods. A lot of them you don't even use yourself. You export them to other nations. It's an arms-dealing nation, a segment of their economy. Can Germany, though, really defend Europe? My question would be, in the absence of the UK, in the absence of strong cooperation from most of Eastern Europe, is Germany, maybe twain with France, are they capable of defending Europe against Russia or China or some other force? No, not really. In fact, it'll tear Europe apart. The EU is a dying plan. It's not going to work. We need now, as the United States, in a diplomatic sense, because the tearing apart of the fabric of European culture is looming, we need to decide who we're going to partner with. It behooves us to partner with those nations whose cultures, not just the government, but the cultures feel positively towards us. That means Poland. It means Romania. It means the Baltic states and Finland. It means some of these other, it certainly means the Hungarians, the Slovaks, and so forth. I would add Greece to that list at this point. It may involve Italy. Italy's looking up. These other states around Germany and France, though, are basically lost. Although we shouldn't, I will say this, we shouldn't take up a hardline approach to the UK. We should be their best friend in the world to try to shelter them from any economic fallout as they leave the European Union. If that requires some expenditure on our behalf, so be it. Long ally, very powerful ally. It would make it look good to the other nations that might want to free themselves of the European Union by having a big buddy over here on this side of the Atlantic that's willing to guarantee their sovereignty. Not just in a military sense. If you have economic problems because Merkel's trying to bully you, screw Merkel. We'll take care of you. We've got a bigger economy than Germany. We got a hell of a lot bigger military. We got a hell of a lot more manpower. And we've got a global reach. We'll take Eastern Europe under our wing. It's not necessary for you to suck off Angela Merkel, and you shouldn't have to. These nations know what the kind of policies the EU is spawning lead to because they were behind the Iron Curtain. They know about central planning, a la Brussels. They know about limitless bureaucracy. They know about constant government censorship in the name of benevolence. The USSR used to censor people, and then it would, with a straight face, it would tell them, oh, this is for your own protection. It's to keep those evil capitalists out. We're going to keep you safe by limiting what you can say, what you can believe, the kind of art that you can make, the kind of religious decisions you can make. That's the way that the European Union is going. They're falling into the same trap as the USSR. The Western Europeans, though, were never behind the Iron Curtain and don't realize what they're doing. I think the average person in Poland understands a little bit better about what's happening in Europe right now. I'd be afraid. If I were Polish, if I were living in Poland, I'd be terrified of Angela Merkel. I would be absolutely fucking terrified of this woman. I'd be terrified of Macron too. I'd say, oh, am I going to end up being forced to speak German anytime soon? I think we've been through this before. I don't think it's a great time. What about the Russians over there? Well, Merkel's not going to get her European military. What are we supposed to do? Oh, that's right. The United States still exists. Oh, okay. I guess everything's fine. In Asia, why do you think a lot of these East Asian states now are feeling more and more positively towards the U.S.? Who cares what Angela Merkel thinks? You know, the funny thing is this. Here's the hilarious part, I think, to me. The funniest thing about this is that the same people who say Western culture is evil, the same people that were saying genocide, Native Americans yesterday on the 4th, say Western culture is evil, European pan-diaspora is evil, everything about Caucasian culture is evil. These same people They weigh the opinions of foreign leaders and they put Angela Merkel, a German, and Macron, a Frenchman, at the top, and then they ignore what's being said by people in the Philippines. They ignore what's being said in Eastern Europe. They ignore what's being said in many of these other states around the world who don't feel negatively towards the United States by us having somebody leading our nation that's capable of insulting another world leader, because I think they understand where we're coming from. The Western Europeans who weren't enslaved, who are the ones that typically do the enslaving throughout history, don't understand. The people there don't quite get it because they're still technically ethnocentric. They're very Eurocentric. The Germans believe Germany is God's gift to the world. The French believe that France is God's gift to the world. Now, I have no ill will towards any specific person in France or Germany, other than their leadership, of course. But that is a cultural mode that sort of disfigures the entire argument over the EU, especially when it's being talked about by people over here who I don't think quite get that either. I think there's a little bit of a blindness among the average American really towards the way Western Europe really thinks about the world. But if you talk to thousands and thousands of Western Europeans, eventually you get sort of a sense of that sort of stuff. And it doesn't matter if they're on the left or on the right. The far right there might say, oh, Europe strong, white Europe, haha, European culture. We're good, ethno-states again. The left wing there basically is saying the same thing, but they're simply saying, oh, our pro-globalist European leaders are so great. They're a grace to the world. It's a wonderful thing. And that's really what it's about. So yeah, why would he, if I were Trump, I would spurn Merkel altogether. I'd go meet with Macron. I'd go meet with the French. I wouldn't even bother meeting with Merkel. Nor would I ever go to Belgium. I'd sense that they're hosting the seat of evil of our times, and Angela Merkel is like their chosen one. The heir to the throne, the next Charlemagne or something like that. Only this time, not so benevolent and with less foresight. Something like that. She wants to bully her neighbors into taking in refugees when some of her economic neighbors are economically backwards. Poland doesn't have the strongest economy in the world. It's growing. It's certainly developing. Much respect to them for accomplishing what they have after years and years of USSR slavery. That could all be reversed if they were to undergo a transformation into sort of Merkelite policies. I don't think it'd work in Eastern Europe. I think it'd probably cause a lot of violence. I think that's probably what would result. The Germans may not have a problem with it. The French may not have a problem with it. The Belgians may not have a problem with it. Maybe the Dutch don't have a problem, or the Swedes. I think the Polish would. I think they'd commit genocide, actually. I think they wouldn't tolerate that. You don't want to push them too far. It wouldn't be the greatest idea, I think, for European togetherness. If you want a togetherness in Europe, you have to split the countries apart so they can work amiably together towards the same goals in a voluntary manner. Left to their own devices, the people of Europe are not going to be warlike and constantly headhunting one another. It's like this weird mythology that people have spawned, that if the EU falls, NATO somehow goes out too. It doesn't make any sense. Or the EU stops existing, therefore all of Europe falls into civil war and they start trying to butcher one another. It's not going to happen. What's going to cause violence, what's going to cause nations to split out of NATO is the European Union itself. That's the problem. Globalism is involuntary. It doesn't work. No people in the world will fully accept it. There will always be a few people who they're taken in by the propaganda of their leaders. Oh, that we'll be wealthier, we'll be more tolerant, it'll be a better society. That sort of social engineering stuff is straight out of the USSR. It's the same friggin' thing. Stalin sitting there, oh yeah, look at all these different semi-autonomous regions coming together under the glories of communism. Okay, we're going to centrally plan everything. We're going to institute bureaus over every aspect of life, micromanage what you can and cannot say. Doesn't that eerily resemble what Germany's doing right now? Only perhaps with a bit better an economic outlook? Doesn't it look pretty much the same? And of course, the Germans then control Brussels and they abuse their neighbors to keep their economy going. It's wonderful. They get to give brain drain to all of Eastern Europe. It's what they're doing. They're draining Poland. They're draining Hungary like a vampire. Merkel is basically a psychic vampire of sorts, a political vampire, trying to rob all the cultures around her so she can buff up her own economy and stay in power, long enough to enslave all the people of Europe, which is probably her goal. On paper, it's we want to be tolerant, we want European peace and togetherness, I just want to drink my beer. Yeah, bullcrap. I think she wants something a lot more than that. But you won't hear it from her. You certainly won't hear it from any of the other leaders in Western Europe. Maybe Theresa May would pipe in. She doesn't want to piss Merkel off too much, though, while negotiations are ongoing for the Brexit, I suppose. That's about all. Peace out.